welcome to Stratagon webinar. This is exciting. As usual, we have a webinar every quarter of the year. Before I continue explaining further about the webinar today, let me introduce myself. I'm Lara Potter, Stratagon Marketing Manager. Such an honor to be here and to be able to host you and hopefully get some great questions today. Today's webinar's theme is Fit the Soil to Fit the Plant. We have the very amazing Dan Sutton. Dan, how are you?
Oh, I'm good, thank you.
Yeah, so Dan is National Agronomy Manager from Ecogrowth. Worth mentioning that this is the highest participant registration that we've ever received. So Dan said to me, fantastic, amazing people actually registered, gotta be your marketing. I said, thank you very much, but I will not take the credit. I believe Dan's work speaks for itself, and Ecogrowth as a brand, just across marketing and what they do and all the products that's out there has been really fantastic and loved by many. Let me just chat a little bit with Dan here, trying to get to know Dan better about what he does. Maybe you want to tell us a little bit about your background, Dan?
Oh, well, I've been with Ecogrowth now for over 20 years. Very proudly helped to set the tone in the early days. So my background is I completed a degree, Bachelor of Science in Environmental Management. So I've always been very, I dislike, but I can't think of a better word, holistic. I'm very interested in, the overall and how things sort of fit together and work, which sort of dovetails perfectly with, what we do and what we're talking about today. So very much looking forward to hopefully sharing some experience with you guys.
Yeah, knowledge and passion, because last week we actually ran through the presentation just very briefly. I caught that just straight away, passion of what Dan does for Ecogrowth, and I think it'll be very inspirational and also informative for many. If you can maybe describe a little bit about your day-to-day work with Ecogrowth, how does that look like?
So I'm the National Agronomy Manager, which means that I get a huge overview of all the different facets of our involvement with people on the ground. So sometimes I get to touch that personally myself or through the team. And so we get to look at a lot of technical uses of products and development and a lot of problem solving, which is probably the thing I enjoy the most. Whether we're dealing with people who are got an acid sulfate soil or high levels of salt or just a leaching soil, non-wetting, all of these sort of weird and wonderful. I really get a buzz out of working with that and thinking outside of the box. That's probably the thing I enjoy the most. And we've got a fantastic team for doing that. So that's sort of a large part of my role. I'm also involved in product development, so quality control and things like that. So I very much enjoy the technical. And I like working with people that are passionate, and that's what I find, whether it be home gardeners or our farmers. I get to deal with people that are really passionate about soil health and everything that goes with, that sort of way of farming. And it's just a lovely bunch of people we have right around the country that I get to work with.
Yeah, how fantastic is passion? What's the point of doing what we're doing unless we have passion?
That's right.
Once again, if you have just joined us, we have Dan Sutton, National Agronomy Manager from Ecogrowth, and today's theme is Feed the Soil to Feed the Plant. So I will put myself on mute and I will let Daniel start the presentation. All the best, Dan.
Hi, everyone. And Lara did such a good job of introduction, I don't really need to do one, but just to recap, Ecogrowth's been around for a little while now, 25 years next year. And we've been a key player in the turf industry as well as many other industries across Australia now during that period. And thank you very much to all the people that support us out there. If you turn on the sport and watch a bit of footy or such, the chances are you've seen some of the surfaces that we've been involved with. So what I want to do today is not make it a big infomercial. I definitely want to cover some products and the technology and maybe how they're a bit different. But I really feel that something like this is about giving. And so what I'm trying to do is entwine through that so that you come away with hopefully an appreciation for, you know, the whole message of feed the soil to feed the plant. And the reason I'm going to focus on that is because I want to emphasize the fact that we're not trying to do everything hydroponically. We're trying to bring everyone to the table. We want to talk about soil health. We want to talk about longevity, you know, really robust outcomes that are good for everyone involved, and that really give us that holistic outcome. And I guess one of the things I want you to take away from today is that, if nothing else, give the soil something to do. So rather than thinking it's our job to do everything, let's respect and bring nature into the equation and get that soil performing and wanting the same outcome. So this is why I sort of chose the title "Feed the Soil to Feed the Plant," because I think it really sort of brings in that holisticness to it. What I'll do is we'll keep chuffing along. And this is where I'd like to start. One of the big things that's very important for me looking at the environment is to recognize that the soil is not just dirt. It's not just an artificial construct that props the plant up and gives it something to support it in the wind. It's actually a living thing, and it doesn't matter what we do to stop it living, it lives. But of course, the outcome we want is a really healthy, positive one. So I'm going to keep coming back to this message and we'll grow on it. But just from this slide, I thought I'd pop this in there to start with, because it sort of demonstrates that there's an interaction between the plant and the soil. There's actually as much giving as there is taking. But essentially what you've got in the soil is lots of microorganisms, lots of minerals, and lots of interactions between the plant and the soil that make it hum. And what we want to do is we want to increase that productivity. Whether we're just talking about something that we want to be really tough and resilient and hardy and look fantastic like a lawn, or whether we're trying to grow fruit trees and produce food and things like that, we want the environment to want the same outcome as us. Because if we're all on the same page, then we don't have to fight each other. You fight each other when you have to keep reaching for the medicine jar to try and fix problems that we created. So let's continue along that theme and just think about really giving the soil a role in this process. So I'm going to put this into context of what we do, of course, so that way you come away with hopefully a broader understanding and can put the pieces together yourself. So one of the things that we like to do that's a bit different is use non-soluble forms of nutrients. Now, that's a bit bonkers when you consider that fertilizers are chemistry, right? So we've got a plant stuck in the ground, and traditionally we tended to think about it, certainly since the Industrial Revolution and the wars, etc. We think about this plant as being a glorified straw sticking into the soil and slurping up the soluble nutrients we give it, because how else are nutrients taken up? But plant root is a little sucking device, isn't it? So the idea of putting something in there that's just not immediately soluble seems a bit nuts. But when you look at the natural environment, everything's non-soluble, very stable. And in Australia in particular, we've got some really weathered soils. And so there are other processes at play. And if we utilize those processes and encourage them, we get a different outcome. So things like soft rock phosphate are very interesting. They have phosphorus in them, but not overly soluble. As the name suggests, it's a clay. Now, certainly in Western Australia, we've got some very sandy, leaching soils. In fact, anything we can do to increase nutrient retention, water retention, etc., to balance our soil is a good thing. So having a nutrient that actually acts as a soil building block is very useful. And of course, soft rock phosphate has a lot of other traces, and it's not just about phosphorus. I'm using these as examples. These are not the entirety of what we do, but I think they're really good materials to focus on, just to give you an idea of what I'm talking about when I talk about a rock mineral or a low soluble, non-soluble sort of nutrient to feed a plant. So lignite is another one. It's basically brown coal. We dig it out of the ground. But lignite is really just a mature compost, very young subbituminous coal. And so it's fantastic at feeding biology, at holding nutrients, holding moisture. Palagnite is another mineral, just as an example. It's related to basalt. It's got loads of trace in it, and it's sort of a little bit clay-like. Some of these rock minerals are really interesting because the way their structure forms, they do really cool things when they lock into the soil and the plants and biology start to interact. So I'll touch on that some more later. And then, of course, carbon. We talk about carbon a lot these days, but one of the things that should happen in the soil, if you've got healthy plants and you've got a community of organisms working together, is you actually take carbon out of the atmosphere and you grow it into the soil, and then you use it because it cycles. So we'll do, just put that in a bit more context. Now, problem with these things is they need to be convenient to use. And when we started doing this a long time ago, it's very hard. You know, we don't really want to be throwing dust around. It gets up people's noses. It's not a thing to do. So one of the things that Ecogrowth did that was a first, certainly in Australia, was to take all of these raw materials and put them together in a little ball. And I'm quite passionate about this process because people tell me our fertilizer looks ugly. Well, how else were you to know that it's different? But when you crack it open, you can see it's like a little pudding. We've got all of these unusual raw materials and we've incorporated them together. And strangely, they actually look a lot like a natural colloid or crumb soil. When you think about it, you go to a textbook for soil science, and a crumb of soil is basically mineral, which you can see those little bits of quartz there, clay, to help stick it together, with some organic matter, which is a nice sort of like little sponge. And then you've got spaces for air and water so that it's just right for plants to grow in. And then you've got all these microorganisms that get in there and etch away and cycle things and make really cool molecules and do all sorts of cool stuff and create a glue to hold it together. And that's essentially what we have created, in a sense, when we make these fertilizer granules. So they are very different to the salts that we traditionally use. And I'm not about saying that what we've done in the past is wrong. I'm just saying that there is a balance that we can strike that allows us to have productivity and a healthy environment. And that's what we're striving for. So one of the things that we realized early on is that we can stimulate soil health and biology, but sometimes we've done a really good job of killing our soil, you know, whether it be scooping it all up and just bearing it off to subsoil and putting a house on it with a heap of chemicals to keep the white ants away, or other things that we do. We end up with a pretty basic sort of dead soil. So part of our process was to bring that soil back to life. So first of all, we're providing them, the bugs in the soil, with something to do. We're giving them some nutrient-dense materials that need a little bit of help to feed the plant. And then sometimes you've got to kickstart that process. And so what we've done is, over time, developed a technology called Ecogrowth. Now, Ecogrowth, watch this space. We are actually going to publish more information about it shortly. But essentially what Ecogrowth does is it's a food, and it's also some living biology to help get the fundamentals working. We're not trying to replace the bugs that are in the soil. What we're trying to do is take some very specialized laboratory grown bugs and just start those processes going again, with the idea that the whole thing will snowball and take off, and our indigenous bugs will just go to town. But we're creating the right signals and starting points to get lots of good activity happening. So Our fertilizer is a little different. If you haven't already gathered, it's actually quite a lot different. One of the strange things that happen is if you get it wet, and we're looking at base material at the moment, if you get it wet, it starts to grow. This freaks people out sometimes. You know, what you're looking at there is, in this picture, most likely trichoderma, which is a saprophytic fungi, because that will actually grow off our rock minerals, where most of the bugs we use actually need a plant to host them. And it's a sign of life that you don't normally get on a salt fertilizer, because we're not a salt fertilizer. And what it enables us to do is start the process of connecting the plant with the raw materials, which looks much like this. This is I hope I get this right, electron micrograph. And it's essentially showing mycelium, not unlike what you're seeing to the left, but in this case, mycorrhizal fungi, which is something we also put in there, and how it connects a colloid of soil to a plant. And the name mycorrhizal fungi actually means fungal root system, basically. It's a channel, and it's attaching those minerals and etching them out and then providing them to the plant. More on that later. So, just before we get further into how the biology are doing things, etc., I'd like to put it into a little bit of context. What does this mean to you when you do something with fertilizer? So first of all, most of the products in our range are a hybrid. We have some that are registered organic that are completely mineral. However, we also straddle the middle ground where we need a fast response, but we want to do it in a way where we're building soil health, making plants strong, better, healthier. But we want to do that by giving the plant and the bugs the ability to mine and take what they want from those minerals as they want it. We're not trying to tell them how to do their jobs. So emerald is a great example. It's a bit of a show-off product. This is the one that if you want the best lawn in the street, or you've got a presentation, Anzac Day, something like that, and you need an absolutely smick surface. It takes about 7 days to kick in, and what you get is a really, really consistently green color, hence the name. Now, when you look at the analysis, you'll notice that there's an awful lot of things in there. Most lawn fertilizers are, first of all, they're built to a budget, and they essentially are sulfate of ammonia, muriate of potash, and then if it's a good one, maybe some manganese and some iron for color. And that's about it. And in fact, when you reach that analysis, you haven't made a ton. So you've got to dilute it with something so it doesn't burn. So certainly for home garden fertilizers, they tend to put a lot of sand as a bulking agent. That's normal. We don't do that. We have these wonderful minerals, which in effect give us a living fertilizer, so that we don't need a bulking agent. We can do all these extra things with them ongoing. So we've still got soluble nitrogen in there, but we've got a lower analysis than most. We've got manganese and iron. We've got it in several forms. A lot of it's rock mineral based. We've got potassium in a sulfate form as well as a rock mineral. We feel the sulfur is actually very important. We don't want to add chloride. And then we've got some phosphorus. Now, we don't put a lot of phosphorus in there because maintenance grass doesn't need a lot, but phosphorus is very important for root growth. So you want some. And what we want to do is have it in a form that the plant can take it as it needs it, hence the mineral base that we're using. So all of that together, you've got molybdenum, you've got silicon, you've got magnesium. What happens is you get a really, really consistently coloured lawn because you're picking up those minor sort of deficiencies. There might have been a pile of bricky sand over there, might have been a dunny in the corner over there. The soil can be pretty weird underneath some of these developments. This helps to even it right out. That's why it looks so consistent in colour. But probably the most important thing is, because of the way the fertilizer works, the way microbes work, we develop a lot of root growth, and that's really must. Normally when you're putting on a nitrogen-based lawn fertilizer, what you're getting is a lot of top growth, and you've got to cut it. Now, if you over-apply ours, the very same thing will happen. So don't over-apply it, put on the right amount. But what you'll find is that because you're getting a lot of root growth, you won't get as moisture stressed as easily, and it will thicken and tighten. And then these things like calcium and magnesium and silicon, they help to toughen the plant so you get a harder wearing surface. So in a nutshell, there's a few differences that come when you start to work the soil. Just wanted to show you just a couple of different examples and then move on. Our red, primarily not for lawns. It's got too much phosphorus in it. Don't need that amount of phosphorus for lawns. It's very good if you want to feed a fruit tree or establish root crops, root vegetables, things like that. Brilliant for getting lawn going, because lawn does need phosphorus when you're starting it up. And it's very good if you've got a patchy surface where you're getting a lot of wear in the middle of an oval or the goals or whatnot. You'll find that the extra phosphorus in mineral form it's available in is really good for promoting lots and lots of root growth. Part of that is, remember I said there was trichoderma on the granular fertilizer before. So one of the byproducts of trichoderma, you may have heard of trichoderma because it's a saprophyte. Basically, it lives naturally in the leaf litter and it consumes organic matter and humifies the soil. But it also tends to take on rhizoctonia and all sorts of things that we can't make label of claims about, but it competes with other bugs in the soil. And so it's achieved a certain amount of notoriety for that. But what people don't talk about is it helps to mobilize certain nutrients like calcium, iron. It also secretes auxins, which is a hormone that pushes out root growth. So for lots of reasons, when you start to introduce some of these biologies and give them a job to do, give them some carbon to get them started with, etc., give them some lawn clippings, what they tend to do is they encourage the roots to spread. And that's, I'll get back to that point in a moment. That's one of the reasons why these products really push out roots and give you this really nice, healthy, strong, tough plant. So red is a very good builder of roots. And just lastly, the other granular product I just wanted to touch on, just to complete the picture, is blue. These are all part of our national range. Now, blue is very universal. So when people say, well, I need something that can do this and that, and what this covers it. And I got to tell you that I reviewed the analysis of this just before the presentation to make sure I got this right. But blue is only one ingredient of being registerable organic. So that analysis is in there. The only reason we can't register that organic is because we put extra nitrogen in there. Everything else in there is actually registerable organic. So this is what I mean when we try to straddle the line and give products that are very effective, but actually drive the biology. Now, one of the nice things about this is, because of the way the phosphorus is presented in it, it's actually quite safe to use on natives with care. So, like with all things, too much is too much. However, we have commercially grown proteas and various other natives with variations on blue. Stick to the label rates unless you know better, little often. Natives like a little bit of phosphorus, but they do not like it in a soluble form. When you put on too much soluble nutrient, what you do is you replace the job of the beneficials that are doing the work for you. So you can give them the raw material and they can collaborate with the plant and decide when that plant needs that bit of phosphorus. That's fine. But if you put it on in a really soluble form, first of all, you result in that biology really not having a job to do anymore. And so the plant stops feeding them. And we'll talk about that. And so what happens is you can not necessarily kill the biology, but decrease their effectiveness. And then the plant's in trouble, particularly if it's a native that relies heavily on them, because it starts to get invaded by other bugs that aren't necessarily as useful, and it loses functionality. And in some ways, that's how some of the traditional herbicides work. So it's not a good thing to do. You want to encourage the indigenous biology that support a plant, not take it away. So blue is a very universal product. It can be used on ornamentals, it can be used on fruit trees, it can be used on lawn, though in WA, it's commercially can be used, but it's got a little bit more phosphorus than we normally would put on. That's why emerald is so good for lawns. So what I'd like to talk about a bit more is what's actually going on around the root and why we're feeding the soil to feed the plant. Well, you probably got the idea that biology are quite good at getting into some of these low solubles. And in fact, if you want to encourage biology in the soil, give them a job, give them something to do. This is where compost and all those things are really useful because they put energy into the system, but they've got to have the raw materials. And if they're not there in the soil, and there's always something there, But if they're not there sufficiently to grow and get a realistic outcome that you need in a sensible amount of time, then we have the tools to put them on, and we can put enough soluble with them just to get the process going. But we don't want to replace that process. And one of the things you might have seen is if you pull a plant out of the ground, particularly in WA in our real sandy soil, sometimes you might see these weird dreadlocks. They're called riser sheaths. And that's basically all the secretions that come out of the plant hair tips are full of food, sugars, and messages that instruct the biology what the plant wants for its trouble. And so they will start to share resources. And what happens is biology love this. This is their home. When we talk about, say, free living nitrogen fixes, we're not talking about one being, half a kilometre that way. We're actually talking about it being on the root surface, basically, because that's where it wants to be. That's where all the goodies are. And so when that's happening, you get this sort of dreadlock effect where these bugs are literally living on the surface of the root and they're grabbing all the minerals and pulling it together, and they're doing wonderful things. So if you pull a plant out the soil, give it a light shake, and the soil stays on and it looks like that, you're doing something good. So I've called the title of this presentation Feed the Soil to Feed the Plant, but it's actually a two-way street. And one of the things I wanted to emphasize when talking about products is that you can bend and break the rules, and you can do some really cool things that end up with the sum being greater than the parts. So what we've tried to do is when we design a product, we design it specifically for a job. And we design it to do that job very well, and we hope you like it. But what we really want to see is you take the lead and run forwards and really get the most out of what you're doing. And so what we try to do is actually have overlap so that you can achieve more, sometimes with less. And isn't that the name of the game? Getting the soil healthy, building up nutrition, getting nutrient cycling. We don't want to go down the path of just emptying them all. Oh, the bag's nearly finished, throw the rest on. No, sometimes less is more. And that's what gives us this soil that's working and this health. So Ecovital, very old product, predates me in the business. Ecovital contains kelp. So you've come across kelp and seaweed products. It also contains fish, and it contains lots and lots of plant extracts. And what it's designed to do is be a really good food. So you can give it directly to the plant, give it to the soil, or you can put it on the leaf. And what will happen is you'll see the plant pick up straight away. It's very quick, very good as a stress reliever, and will really bring out the health and the color in the plant. Now, what's happening is when you put it on the leaf of the plant, it actually gets absorbed very, very quickly. It gets absorbed directly through the soil too. I like doing both, but I particularly like what I can do through the leaf sometimes with it. So for argument's sake, you've got a punnet of veggies or a nice plant you're taking home from the nursery. It's in the back seat of the car. It's a very hot day, and maybe it gets forgotten a little bit longer, like our first child when I brought it home and everybody said, "Where's the baby?" Oh, crikey, it's in the back of the car still. My wife will never let me forget that. He's 30, by the way, now. I didn't kill him. That poor plant that's wilted in the heat of the sun, don't throw it away. Put it under the veranda, make up some Ecovital, and give it just a gentle feed as per the label instructions over the leaf and into the roots, and then go and make a cup of tea. Go away for half an hour, come back and have a look. You'll be surprised how often it'll stand the plant back up again. Now, what it's doing is a number of things. It's directly giving some nutrition and some support, some turgor in the cells. But what's happening is if you measure the sugars, I've got a refractometer, which is a viticultural thing, but what you'll find is that if you're able to measure the sugars actually go up very quickly. That's how quickly the plant is absorbing and using the product. And it's starting to leak sugars out into the roots. And in the past, when I've done tissue analysis with this sort of exercise before and after, from a washed leaf where we've just squeezed out the juice, what you find is the analysis can go up higher than the product you've applied. Now, how does that work? What's happening is you're getting a microbiome response around the roots. In fact, Murdoch University is working on this product with us, and the data that's coming through is very interesting about what's happening in the leaf and in the root. More on that in the future. But what we do understand is that there's a whole cascade reaction happening when you feed the plant, and the plant's going, right, I've got some resources. I'm going to give them to you, Mr. Soil Microbe, but in return, I want this and this and this and this. Now, if it's got soluble nutrients, it's not going to do that. But if you've given it a reason to work, starts putting those sugars out, and that whole engine room in the soil starts to work. So products like EcoVital standalone work very well, but you can use it if you've got a nice, healthy sort of soil that's teeming with good things to really pump up that system and get it going. And in fact, what's happening is the plant, getting off topic, well, not off topic, but there's a whole science about what's going on there and how the plant actually sends specific signals out to specific bugs. This is off topic, but plants actually can even change what some bugs do. They can tell Fusarium whether to be a saprophyte, which is a good guy, or a bad guy. So, I mean, this is nuts. This is almost the plant saying, I want a suicide. I've had enough of this. Don't make your plant suicide. Give them the good stuff. All right, keep moving. So what I'm saying is you can really feed this environment very simply. And we've talked about two things that in effect, a granular and a food. And yet you've already started this explosion of good activity going on the soil. So when you see these things, recognize them. That's one of the key take-homes, is recognize them. Understand that you can give the soil and the plant something to do for its own betterment. You don't have to do it all for it. One of the last things I want to talk about, because it's sort of the elephant in the room. You can do all these great things, but if it doesn't rain and you're on water restrictions, water is your limiting factor. I would argue that building carbon in the soil will give you a much bigger bucket to hold moisture. And that's one of the reasons this is so important. Plus, it takes you away from using highly salt-based fertilizers by using fertilizers that are hybrid. But you still can't get past the point you need to get moisture in the soil. So because we're very interested in soil health and biology, we didn't want to just be pumping out surfactants that contained things that might harm the biology. So with EcoWet, we're still using a surfactant base, but there's a few other things going on in there. The surfactant is something that we use as a band-aid. You know, a nice healthy soil ultimately shouldn't need it. What we're doing is we're getting the wheel turning. So EcoWet has a highly soluble surfactant in there, purely and simply to break the water retention and to get the moisture into the soil. So when you apply it, you'll see it go bang, disappear immediately into the soil. Step one. Step two, it's got a long-term wetter in there, which will re-wet over and over again from dry, depending on how much you put on, as per corrected rates. What this means is between waterings, if the soil does dry up, there's not enough cover over it, and leaf is one of the best covers you can have. But if there's not enough cover, it's getting sun directly on it and it's going crispy and drying off, it can activate again and again re-wet as more irrigation, more water is applied. But this is where EcoWet then is different. So your cheaper wetters off the shelf of the big green building generally can't put a lot of that sort of stuff in there because it's, you know, it's just the economics of how that place works. These commercial products, so these are 100% active. And another point I'd like to make before I move on is also people ask me about granular versus liquid. So granular products, you have an absorbent stone like a spongolite, and it can take 12, maybe 15% liquid and absorb it. So that's, if you're taking, let's say you're taking 100% surfactant and you're putting it into that absorbent stone, and then you're lightly dispersing it, or you're mixing it with fertilizer, you're actually getting a very small amount of wetter out there. So it might work, but it doesn't repeatedly work the same. A product that has 100%, you're putting a lot more on, so physically you're getting more response. However, our interest is at the health of the soil. So the polymer base that we've got in there, which gives it its unique color, is actually driven from a natural source and has similar properties, but needs a hand to get them in, to get them started. So that's why the surfactants are in there. Originally, we formulated without them. Problem was, if you put it on a slope, it ran to the bottom before it went in. We needed it to go in straight away. So that's why the product is formulated the way it is. But the natural surfactant or polymer that we have in there gives the product a lot of capillary action, and that is unique. So the product actively pulls itself sideways into the dry areas. So it's not just following the path of least resistance down the nearest wormhole, it's actually spreading out into the dry areas, and that by itself tends to bring the grass and plants across into those dead spots. There's actually moisture now there, they can creep in there. But it also helps to feed the biology, like Ecovital. It also helps to hold on to fertilizer so that you become more efficient with your solubles. The concentrate that we use is in all of our packages with the exception of the hose-on pack you can see there. However, the hose-on pack has directions on the back so you can take our concentrate and dilute it down and recharge it. We don't want you throwing it away. EcoWet by itself is a standout product. But more importantly, used as part of a system, you can actually build up the health of that soil, allow the microorganisms to do their job, and reduce, long-term, reduce the non-wetting. And that's probably a topic for another day. But hopefully it gives you a little bit of overview of what's going on in the soil, how you can encourage the soil's help to feed the plant. Just think about it this way. You've got to give the soil something to do. You've got to give those bugs something to do if you want them to help you. So hence the name of the presentation today of Feed the Soil to Feed the Plant. So with that, I would, of course, encourage people to have a look at the rest of the range and talk to Lara and the guys at Strata Green, etc. But you've got the overall view, I guess, of our philosophy and what we're trying to achieve. And please don't forget to go to the website and click on the technical articles under agronomy, because we've got a fantastic science team who try to, in really easy to read form, give you some proper science. And I notice there's a lot of references on the articles that we post up there. So there's a lot of further reading you can do if you really want to. But the beauty of these products, I believe, is that we make it really easy. Okay, Lara, back to you.
We have Lindsay here with a question. Hi there. Such an informative presentation. Are there any trial grounds where the difference between treated and untreated can be seen? Thank you.
We do a lot of demonstrations all the time. However, we've acknowledged that more and more the industry is interested in understanding and being able to use the science of what we're talking about. So to that end, there's actually PhDs being done at the moment. Murdoch University, for instance, and as part of their requirement, they give annual, I'm not sure it's quarterly, but annual presentations. Next one coming up involves walking on the university farm at some of the trials that they're doing. So when I say that there's work being done on Ecovital, for instance, Ecovital is a very old product. It'd be very easy just to say, oh, it works, just use it. But there's so much more all the time that we're learning. And so they're actually doing full DNA and full functional community studies on the microbiomes. That's the area around the plant root where the Ecovital has been tipped in this case, but also inside the root and inside the leaf, because what they've measured and published is the right word, that they've given in presentations to date is, how they've found that they've got yield responses in these fully replicated randomized trials, but they're also going through the data and actually showing there how the indigenous biology are responding to the product. So there's stuff like that. There's commercial trials that get done from time to time. There may be a field walk coming up shortly in Minginyu. So a lot of this does tend to be out in agricultural country. But the best thing I can suggest is there's always information being uploaded onto our website. but talk to your local distributor, your local rep, and they will tell you what's going on locally that you might be able to come along and see. But you will find there's more published data being posted all of the time. Hope that's sort of answered the question.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dan. Well, Lindsay, I'll be more than happy to be in touch with you as well. And if we perhaps able to help you out and connect you with the right people or the right projects, there'll be something that I'll look into after the webinar, and we can be in direct contact on that. The next question is from Debbie. Debbie said, we are also south of the river. Yay, we got southeast. I think I'm the most excited person. Born in South and forever will live in the South. Debbie said that we are trying to convert to a full native garden and removing all our buffalo grass. What products will enhance the soil when it is hydrophobic, sandy soil with some clay added over the years? Do we even need to add anything when being planted in their native soil? Just rock dust or eco advance?
So, I mean, that asks, there are more questions I could ask on the back of that. I mean, first of all, are these natives indigenous to that specific soil, or they're just sort of local West Australian natives, etc.? And then there's the history of the soil. Is the life there quickly enough? In the simplest form, yes, you would, you know, you can take the slow approach and put them in the ground and water them and hope they establish. I suspect the question is more about how do we get them to flourish? Are we going through all this effort? So I would definitely be mixing a little bit of good quality compost in the soil with a mineral base. So the blue, for instance, would be a good starter, but you only need a little bit. And you might come back and just put a little bit round afterwards later, just to get them excited and going, just a stimulus to get them moving and to give them the base. And then quite frankly, you know, Eco-Vital and some good composted mulch around them should get them to start to push out. If the ground is heavily non-wetting, it's going to be an issue. Obviously, it comes down to the time of the year that you're planting as well. Then Eco-Wet is a fantastic tool to get them going. But in the longer term, what you need to do is recreate that environment that they come from. So that might mean, you know, talking to your local nursery, finding out what companions they will go well with, because plants share. Not necessarily their biology, but they share resources that come from that biology. So for argument's sake, if you put an acacia or something in, they're a legume, they produce nitrogen. So they're going to help Big Brother because they've got a fairly short life cycle. So they've got a lot of work to do, but they'll help Big Brother next door establish and get up, and they'll be finished by the time that canopy's up there. So, you know, that's where it's cool. It's almost permacultural. So the rock mineral base is very good to help get things going. Eco-Vital ongoing can be very good to feed and get that system up and running. And, you know, non-wetting in the longer term, I could give a longer answer if I looked at a soil test, but biology is the answer. And the way to get biology is have plants growing and give them something to do with their roots.
There are a couple more questions here. The next one is from Peter. Peter say, how are you growing your microbe communities to add to your products? Are they dormant in the stored product? So
our focus is not on the sheer amount of biology, though there is sometimes an argument for a shotgun. Nor are we trying to provide biology that are active. So most of the biology, so for example, the trichoderma that we use is grown at a university, and it's probably one of the 3 major companies in the world, and they're based at the university campus, that specialize in trichoderma, and they have them basically in a spore form, but they've got them stabilized. So they actually put quite a few species together so that they can handle different pHs, different temperatures, different amounts of UV. So it's actually a very well thought out product. And basically what we're doing is using that as the seed of life. If it does nothing else than stimulate a bit of plant growth and teach the plant that there's some benefit to putting some sugars out, that will encourage lots of other biology. Beyond that, we're providing food and habitat. We're not trying to put lots of, and that's why today we are actually going to release some more information, but we're going to talk more about functional groups of biology rather than CFUs, colony forming units, purely because there are so many different environments that we're using these things. It's about setting up that environment to grow, not about replacing the indigenous biology. So I hope that sort of answers your question, but we use a handful of laboratory grown bugs that are found, they're only allowed in Australia because they're indigenous here. And they are basically, they restore the environment such that life begets life. And I would suggest that if you want to stimulate biology further, this is where feeding them, giving them something to do, and quite frankly, diversity. You'll always get a bigger food web if you've got diversity. And that's diversity of plants, nutrition, etc. Just to add to that previous question, just quickly, I think probably what they were asking was, we use freeze-dried biology, very similar to what's used in medicine. Okay, so I thought that came across, but absolutely. I'll give you a quick anecdotal example of the importance of having soil health, etc. When you're talking food, this is an example I gave you the other day, and this comes from our friends at Murdoch University. They are looking at what's going on and trying to understand why some things are better than others, food. They found an artichoke in the south of WA that, for reasons they don't understand, hosts a beneficial microbe around its roots, which produces something called inulin. Now, I hope I get this right. Inulin is taken up by the plant for reasons they don't understand, and it's transferred to the crown, the part of the artichoke that you eat, and it survives your stomach acid. Now, this is just a naturally grown plant that you can buy at the supermarket and eat. And for reasons they don't understand, the inulin produced by this beneficial fungi in the soil is surviving your gut and it's colonizing in your colon. And that's really interesting because healthy people generally have lots of inulin. But people with problems with their colon, cancer, usually don't have any inulin. So why nature is seeing fit to provide us inulin through a natural fungi, naturally growing with a plant, we don't yet understand. But that's the tip of the iceberg of the benefit of having healthy soil and healthy plants.
Yeah, wow, that's mind-blowing. I reckon that's fantastic. Like, we sometimes ask questions why, we're actually experiencing certain sickness, but it's literally what we eat and where our meal comes from. Where our meals come from, and it's from the nature, and how we treat the nature really come back full circle at the end of the day. Well, I think that's pretty much the questions that we have for today. And Dan, once again, really appreciate your time. And thank you for being here. And before we close, do you have any additional things that you want to share to us, or maybe some gems around you are what you eat, which is kind of the theme of today?
Oh, look, just thank you very much for inviting us, inviting me to be part of your series. There's a whole team behind what you see today. I'm just a passionate part of it. Just think about all those, those ecosystems of knowledge and experience that we all put together, and keep sharing, the love and joy of what we do.
For sure. Thank you very much. And I think I want to take time to also thank Ecogrowth team, just everyone else that's already helping out for this to happen. Thank you for Ashley, Cam, as well, Jill, and again, Dan, for the time that you have put aside to be with us today. And once again, stratagreen.com.au/ecogrowth for all the information, or you can email us info@stratagreen.com.au. All right. Well, Laura Potter signing off and wishing you a great day. And once again, thank you, Dan, and have a nice lunchtime.
You guys.
See you, everyone. Thank you for your participation. Bye-bye.
Bye.